Welcome to Intro to Gen Z Apologetics. My name is Tanita Maddox, and I serve as an Associate Regional Director for the Mountain West region. So, Intro to Gen Z Apologetics, what are we talking about? Well, we're really talking about how do we explain aspects of the gospel, aspects of our faith to Generation Z, which is our adolescents right now, in a way that they understand that addresses their questions, their values, and so on. So, Generation Z are those who began being born in the mid to late 1990s, which places the oldest top of this group as entering the workforce. But really, for all of us, it is our middle school, high school, and college students that we are with right now. They are digital natives, meaning they have grown up with smartphones and tablets and social media, and that virtual world is their first language. This is different than millennials who grew up with the internet, but not necessarily this kind of virtual space that Gen Z has had. They're the largest, most diverse generation, more than half being non white. And they're post Christian in their worldview, meaning they don't have a lot of cultural reference to understanding biblical or matters of the faith. Mostly don't understand the Bible or have any reference to it, and they're highly likely to have religiously unaffiliated parents, meaning there's no kind of faith structure in their home. They experience high levels of pressure, the idea of never being enough. Thing about this is with competition increasing and become sensationalized. So you got MasterChef Junior and other TV shows who show highly skilled children competing, and they have watched this and see this idea of needing to be skilled and perfect at a very young age. If you've worked with middle school, high school, and college students, you are probably seeing these things already, but this is what research is also saying is true about this group of kids. They have high levels of anxiety as a generation, a highly depressed generation, the loneliest generation. And so these are things that we are experiencing with our kids. They're anxious, depressed, and lonely. There's a delay in adolescence or a lengthening in childhood, which meaning experiences that may have been typical for the adolescent 10 years ago are being put off to a later age. Things like getting a driver's license may not happen at 16, it may happen at 18 or 19 years old, getting a job and so forth. Those are getting delayed. Those are becoming delayed experiences. They're surrounded by addictive technology. So technology that is designed to grab more of their time and more of their energy at an increasing rate. They are marked by a fear of missing out, or FOMO, as we call it, because if you think of their virtual world, there's always something happening, which means there's always something you're missing out on. It also has allowed them to see if their friends are hanging out without them or stuff that's going on that they weren't invited to. And that has led to also this FOMO. They have values and identity shaped by social media, and we'll get to that in a second. They also have a high concern for social justice. The cultural values of Gen Z is they have a high value for safety. That's not just physical safety, it's emotional safety, it's safety from risk, safety from danger, safety from embarrassment, safety from shame. All these kinds of things are wrapped up in their need for safety. They have a high value of acceptance, which may also be called tolerance, acceptance of all people, all belief systems, all values. It's just really important to them. Authenticity, that you are who you say you are. And they understand truth in the context of personal freedom, meaning I decide what is true, you decide what's true, because we need to be free to do what we want to do or think is the right thing to do. Sometimes just what we want to do. They also, again, have a high value of social justice. But this individualized truth, this idea that you can decide what is true and what's moral, and I can decide what's true and what's moral, is the idea that any kind of absolute truth restricts personal freedom or rejects people who don't ascribe to that truth or follow into that. So here's our challenge now. How do we engage with Gen Z's cultural values and their experience as a doorway to share gospel truth? In other words, how do we share the gospel in kids' language and on their terms in a way that's important to them? That's our challenge. So we're going to look at Paul in Acts 17. He speaks in Athens. And there's 5 things that he does that we can apply to sharing the gospel message with kids today. 1, he studies the culture. He walks around. He pays attention to the idols. He knows the philosophy. He can even quote the poets of the cultures he's in, but he really studies the culture that he is speaking to. 2nd, he builds rapport. He treats his audience with respect. 3rd, he uses common language. He uses terms and vocabulary that's familiar with his audience and uses that to speak to them. He also finds a cultural doorway. He identifies the unknown God and identifies that as the Christian God, the God that we worship, and finds that as a way to share the gospel truth. And then he redefines the relationship between humanity and the divine. And we'll get to that in a second. But really, what are people and how are they relate to God is what he redefines. So for example, let's just start with Gen Z's relationship with the idea of truth as our cultural doorway to share the gospel. So studying the actual culture, we understand that media and social media has impacted Gen Z and how they understand truth. They are bombarded and marketed to more than any other generation. And so they're used to edited images. They know that the images they see on social media and on media are not the real thing. They understand that they see curated stories that are designed, and profiles and brands that are designed to make you think a certain thing or tell a certain story that they want you to see. They understand that on social media, people can pick and choose what they want to share, so they can give an image that they want you to see, which may not be the full picture or the real image. They also have heard the term fake news, which has become part of the cultural dialect. And while they may not know exactly what that means or how it relates, the term fake news is part of their cultural world, that they have heard that term. So values are shaped by in their social media space. And how does that happen? Because in real time, they can see what is shamed, what is called out, what is condemned, what is denounced. They can also see what is promoted, what is applauded, what is retweeted. And watching that happen in live time, they can create a value system based on how the culture is responding to things that are shared in the social media space. Why does Gen Z shy away from the idea of there being an absolute truth? Well, these two top values for them, as they understand it, rub against the idea of truth. Remember, they think it's so important to accept all people, all belief systems, all values, and that people should be free to be themselves, their authentic self, right? Be true to yourself. So this idea of you be you and be free to live your truth is of high value. And their understanding of truth would say that once you decide something is true, you are automatically excluding, rejecting, or even oppressing others. And that goes directly against their cultural values. So this is where it's really difficult for them to navigate. So for you and I, let's step away from Gen Z for a second, but for you and I, let's break that down and understand it for a second. First, without truth, there is no such thing as justice, because justice, by its very nature, says there is a right and there is a wrong, which means there is a truth that guides that. And we're going to come back to that in a second. But we cannot have justice without truth. Justice then becomes a gateway to provide an opportunity for grace. We can't have grace without justice. Justice says it's right and wrong, and grace says, oh my goodness, there's forgiveness and mercy in this. And with grace comes acceptance in authenticity. So truth leads to justice, justice leads to grace, and grace leads to the acceptance of your authentic self. That's how we approach the throne of grace, as the Bible says, that we can go to God as we are, totally authentic, and he will accept us in that throne of grace. So that's for you and me to hold in our back pocket, in our heads, and how this flows together. But when we're talking to Gen Z and we talk about social justice is our entry point to talk about truth with this generation of kids. So I'm going to show you three things and three ways we talk about this with our generation of kids. The first one being, sorry, move forward, is a simple illustration I have used. Spoiler alert, we're going to talk about the ending of Avengers Infinity Wars. But this question, why did my high school friends hate the end of Infinity Wars? And it's because of this. The bad guy wins. And so Marvel is playing on this idea that inside of us, we have this inner need for justice to know that good will win and bad will lose. However, if that doesn't exist, if there is no idea of what is true, of what is right and wrong, then Thanos is just living out his truth and there's nothing wrong with his actions. What's your reaction to this? That if there is no such thing as truth, then we cannot be mad about Thanos winning. He's just living his truth. That's one question we can ask our friends, but also one for us to process for ourselves. The second tool I have is an apology. This is unlike apologetics apology. This is an actual I'm sorry apology to our friends in Gen Z to recognize what's going on with them by saying, you have been handed two values that do not go together and they actually work against each other. And I'm so sorry for that. it seems like you are left with this value of accepting all people, all beliefs, all values, but also saying that some are wrong in the name of justice. I'm sorry. I don't know how you can walk through that, trying to figure out how to accept everyone, but also standing for what is right, which means not accepting some. And on top of that, given no sense of what is absolute truth. What is the truth that justice rests on? And if we understand that every generation creates values based on the mistakes of the previous generation, then I, as a Gen Xer, to also say, I'm so sorry, my generation handed this to you, and now you're dealing with this. Now, this does a few things for our friends. One, it gives name for some of the tension that they're feeling. It treats them with respect. It helps them relax and feel seen and feel heard. But it also allows you to build rapport with that student by acknowledging simply what they're wrestling with that's unique to their generation. Now, if truth does and have to exist in the name of justice, the question then becomes, how do you decide what is true? And most of our Gen Z friends will rely on their experience. If it feels right, it's true. If it feels, it is. And this is an idea that we can use as a doorway to talk about truth. Because the reality is our limited experience, our cultural context, or even just our life experience, it skews our idea of what is true. And this example, this dress, which is about a 6-year-old illustration, is a great example, a concrete example for our adolescent minds to look at and go, oh, okay, so here's a limited picture of this dress. And because it's cropped a certain way, some people will see the actual color of the dress, blue and black. Some will see white and gold. I see white and gold. And here's the thing. I would swear I see white and gold when I look at this, and there's nothing that can change my experience of it. But the truth is, just because it's my experience doesn't make it true. Just because it's my experience doesn't make it true. Because when we zoom out from that dress, what we see is it's actually a blue and black dress. But because I got a limited view of it, I decided what was true and then lived in that truth. But sometimes we need to step back and get a fuller picture of what's going on in order to understand really what truth is. And here's a question I can ask my Gen Z friends. Can you be open-minded enough to consider the possibility that what is in the Bible is actually true? This open-mindedness is of Gen Z value. And when we present it, we are allowing them to engage with a value that they have in their culture in a way that allows them to explore this idea of truth. Could they be open-minded enough to explore this? So you'll see in this example, what we did is we studied the idea of Gen Z's relationship with truth and social justice. We build rapport and affirm their longing for justice and how they're feeling this tension. We used common language by unpacking the idea of truth. We found a cultural doorway in their relationship between truth and social justice. And we redefined the relationship between humanity and the divine, meaning, can you step back and acknowledge basically that you don't have the whole picture? And while they may not use these exact words, what this does is point to can you step back and admit, I'm not God or the decider of what is true? So as we look at Gen Z apologetics, as we try to figure out how to explain matters of gospel to our adolescent audience, part of this is understanding what are the questions that they're asking that we can engage with. And this is a little bit of like sneak peek, look forward, see what you can do with kids. But here's some questions that they're asking about their world and around them. We already covered what is truth. Can I trust you goes along with the social media and people not sharing their full authentic self and curated pictures and only certain sides of themselves. And so they want to know if they can trust you and you are who you say you are. Am I safe? We covered that already in their Gen Z values. Do all people matter to God, which is a social justice question. They want to know that God does not exclude people. Am I accepted or will you accept me is more likely the question. And this goes along with the value of authenticity. Can I be real? Can I be authentic? Can you take me with all my good and get out of my ugly? Will you accept me for who I am? And the last one being, am I valued or how do I know I'm valued? This is a question of self-worth. And this is rooted in a lot of the social media measurements that we're watching, that social media does provide measurements of people's value in comments and likes and retweets and followers and all sorts of things. And so these questions come out of that place. So what I hope today does is give you a little taste on how we can start to engage the questions that our adolescent friends are asking, and how do we talk about it in their terms in a way that's important to them and their value system. I'm happy to talk about this with anyone after this, but I hope this is good. Lord blessing to you, and thank you for your heart for kids.